No, I clicked full screen. Thank you. By default it is, but then you actually see me when you see this bizarre interface, then it's actually my screen. Okay, so I'm just going to open up my project from last week, my lesson 5 project, which is on GitHub. So open up your code editor, and as I said, either open up your lesson 4, sorry, your lab 4 or your lesson 5 project. So I'll open up lesson 5. Now, last week we did create this file called server.js. So the Express generator built almost all of this for us. So we created a server.js file. If you don't have this in your project, I want you to create it. So here's what you need to do. So if, for example, you're working in your lab 4, first just make a new file right in your root of your project and call it server.js. It'll just be a blank file. I did walk through this in class last week, but I'm going to show you one more time. Okay? So just create a blank file called server.js. And then if you expand your bin folder and open up the www file, you get this code. So this is all written by the Express generator. We didn't have to write any of this stuff. So what we want to do is select everything, copy the entire text of the bin www folder, and then go to your blank server.js and paste it in. So you have 2 files which are now an exact copy. So server.js is a copy of the bin www. We need to make one change in the server.js file, which is on line 7. Notice this path in our www file is /app. When we publish to Azure, we have to change that path. So where we had 2 dots on line 7, we now have 1 in the server.js. So make that change, then your server.js should look like mine. If you're working in your lab 4 application, the only difference is this is going to say lab 4 here. All the rest of the code's written by the generator. Now, if you're just adding this file, you'll need to make another commit to GitHub, because GitHub won't have your most recent version. So you'll either need to use the command line or your Git desktop client. I'm not going to make a new commit because I haven't changed anything. I'm just going to publish this one as is. So if you open your repository from last week, either your lab 4 or your lesson 5, if you have changes, go ahead and make a new commit. So once you do this, when we go to your GitHub repo, it should include your server.js file with our single dot in the path. So just make sure you have this file in your repository on GitHub.
Oh no, I'm trying everything to link it up, but my GitHub's not working for some reason.
Okay, we'll have to look at it later.
Yeah, I got to maybe follow along on break.
So your next step, once your new version is committed to GitHub, that includes the server.js file. Now what you need to do is log into the Azure portal. You go to portal.azure.com. If you're already logged in to your student email, what would be the best idea is log into Azure from a private window or from a different browser entirely, because you want to log in with your Microsoft account. You don't want to log in with your student credentials. If you've already linked your accounts, you might be okay, but it'd be better to go to a private window and actually have to sign in. It'll do this goofy thing. As soon as you put in your email address, it will then jump you to another page rather than letting you type your password. So creating a site on here is relatively straightforward. So actually, I've already posted this one to GitHub. I'm going to delete it, and I'll recreate it along with you. So just take a second. Okay, so it's gone. So to create a new site, all you need to do is click on New up here on the top left. There's a whole lot of stuff we can do. We just want to click on Web and Mobile. And then we want to choose Web App. So the first item in this list. So every site will run as a subdomain of azurewebsites.net. So you just have to give it a unique subdomain. So I'll just call mine COMP2106 lesson 5, which I can't use because someone else took it, which is fine. So it tells me that subdomain is available, and I'll just leave everything else as it is and click create. So this will create a blank website, and it will copy an HTML file, a default HTML file, into the root folder for me. So it does take a minute or two. So it'll let us know when we're done. Then we should be able to get a link to actually view our site, and we'll see the default homepage that Azure generates for us. I think the file name is hostingstart.html will be the default page that'll get built for us.
What if yours doesn't let you click create?
So you were able to click new and then web and mobile website.
And I typed in the app name and everything, the create button's gray.
Does it have a green check mark beside the app name? Okay, I will have to come and have a quick look. So here's the link to my site now. If I click this, it'll open a new tab, and I'll just get this blue kind of splash screen. So the server automatically generates this file. But what we want to do now is we want to deploy our site from GitHub. So over here in the settings panel, if I scroll down, if I choose continuous deployment, this will allow us to link our GitHub repository to this website and also set it to deploy continuously. Basically, we'll check GitHub. I think it's every 30 seconds or every 60 seconds for new commits. So as soon as we make a new commit to GitHub, Azure within a minute will automatically sync it to the live server. Now we can also set it up so that we're deploying it we're syncing it manually. If we're working, we don't want our changes to be synced until we're done, we can do that. I'll just set up continuous deployment. So click this, which opens this panel, and then it says choose the source. So here are all of the different options we have. You can deploy from Dropbox, Bitbucket, from OneDrive, which is handy. I may as well, we'll use GitHub. Now it will probably, under authorization, you'll probably need to click this and enter your GitHub username and password. I've already linked my GitHub account to my Azure account. So once it says GitHub here in this section, you probably need to click where it says authorization and enter your GitHub username and password. And once you've done that, yours should look kind of like this. It'll have your GitHub username here once you've logged in. Then it's asking, okay, choose the project on GitHub you want to use as the source. So I'll click on choose project. And because I'm logged in with my Git credentials, it shows me all of my repositories. So I'm going to pick my lesson 5. So pick whatever repository you just worked on, whether it's lab 4 or lesson 5, doesn't matter. And then it will ask you to choose the branch. It will default to the master branch. And I'll just click OK. So now Azure is using our Git credentials to go to GitHub and fetch all of the code out of this repository. So because the app's relatively small, it doesn't take long. Now, anytime if we want to sync it manually, we can just click the sync button, but it will be checking, as I said, I think it's every 30 or every 60 seconds. It will now check this repository for changes. So you have access to really the whole suite of hosting tools. We can do auditing. We can see the use of our application. We could password protect it if we don't want people to be able to see it. We could put on a username and password. I could set up things like SSL certificates, user accounts. And we can see requests, errors, things like that. So it's finally done. So we actually can see, this is also where the name of your commit messages are useful, right? Because those commit messages describe a version. So it's my first commit that's active. If I go back and refresh now, hopefully my app is going to load. So here's our app from last week. So all the functionality we built with Node and the Express generator last week is now online in the cloud. So it's quite hands-off. We don't need to use FTP at all. All we need to do as we're working on the app is commit new changes to GitHub, and they'll automatically get synced to Azure. So if you want to break this, you can just click on disconnect. If I make a new commit, we'll see. I'm going to go back to my solution. Maybe I'll just open up something. I'll open up, let's say, my random.ejs. Maybe I'll just put a heading on this. Just open up a file. Put on a title. Say we're generating a random number with Node. I'm just going to change something in here so I can make a new commit. So I'll just change the text on this page. If I go back to my GitHub client now, It's telling me I've got uncommitted changes. So I'll say added a title to the random page. And I'm going to make a new commit. And now I want to sync this to my remote repository on GitHub. So I'll push this change. So my change is done. If I go back and look at my repository again, we can now see the message of my second commit. And so my code is online now. So now if I go back to my Azure panel, I haven't even done anything, but notice it's already found that this new commit's there and it's already updating my site. It's pulling the repository again. So now it shows me that my first commit version is inactive. My second commit is now the active version. And if I go back and reload the app, it'll be slow to restart the first time I load it just because the app's been restarted. And now my code is here. So making changes is as easy now as work locally. When you're done making a bunch of changes, commit them to GitHub. They're automatically going to show up on Azure. And if I mess something up, well, I can go back if I want. If I want to make this commit the older version active, it's still here. I get this deployment history. So I have the option to redeploy my earlier version if I've broken something. Right? So every time I make new commits, they'll just show up. This will just be a log. And this is where our commit messages really help us because they're describing. So these are notes for you every time you make a new commit that you're describing what changes you made in there. That will help you if something goes wrong here. It'll even tell us how long this commit was active for. So all of this stuff is logged. We can just close out of these windows this way. Now we still can use FTP if you want. We can set up, I think this link, get the publishing profile. This should allow us to set up FTP credentials, or maybe it's in here. But really this is awfully easy to just deploy it straight from GitHub. Now we have our version control, we have our online backup, and we are getting it automatically synced to our live server. So this is one option for you for your assignment 1 and for the other assignments in this class. This is probably the easiest way to get your assignment online, is to use your Azure account. I'm also going to push this up. I suggested that we also try using Heroku. So there's a couple of resources here. Obviously, I'm filming this, so you'll be able to watch this, me step through this on YouTube anytime, okay? There is a 3-minute video tutorial from Microsoft where basically Scott Hansman walks through the same process that I just did. There's also a similar kind of step-by-step tutorial here. How to build a site with the quick site with the Express generator, push to Git, and deploy to Azure. And this was just updated a few weeks ago. Now they've done it slightly differently, but by and large, it's the same process. So you build the local Express site, deploy to GitHub, and then soon you've pushed it to Azure. So I find this process is fairly easy. If you don't like Azure or you're having trouble with it, we can do it on Heroku as well. So I think I asked you to create a free account here a while ago. So if you don't have one, you can sign up for one in pretty much instantly. Actually, I'll just delete. This site will give you 5 free applications, which I've used, so I need to delete one. And actually, I'll do this in another window as well. So I'll have to log in. So I'm going to log into my account here. Now, there are different ways you can deploy to Heroku. They do have an application you can download that actually lets you push from the command line, but I'm just gonna do it right through the website. So this kind of looks like GitHub. All right, I'll click on new and create new web app. Now, you can either give it your own name or they choose a random name, like Cloudy River 29 is what they'll name your application if you don't give it your own name. And just like on Azure, it will run under a subdomain. So you've got to pick something available. I'll just leave it as United States and I'll click create app. So it's going to be, mine will be COMP2106 -lesson5.herokuapp.com. It will be a subdomain. And right here, as soon as we do this, it jumps us to the deploy screen, and now we can deploy straight from GitHub if you want. So I'll click on GitHub. I've already connected my GitHub account to Heroku. You guys haven't, so it will prompt you to log in to authenticate through your GitHub account. And once you do, it'll bring up your username, and now you can just type the name of any repository and search for it. So here's my lesson 5 repository that I just updated a minute ago. And you just click the connect button. So it's almost the identical process to working in Azure, really. So now it says I'm connected to this repository. I can choose to enable or disable automatic deploys. By Azure, the default is automatic deployment is enabled. On Heroku, you actually just have to click this button, meaning every time we make a new commit to GitHub, automatically have Heroku be checking that repository for new commit. So I'll click on enable automatic. So it's now enabled. I get this little green check mark. It says automatic deploys from my master branch are enabled. Anytime I want to turn it off, I can just click that button and it'll shut it off. And then I just need to click deploy branch. So it's trying to pull my stuff from GitHub. Tells me I was deployed successfully, and now we can open it up. So this will just open a new tab. If I click view, I should get an error. There may be one extra file we need to create on Heroku. Let's see. Sometimes there's a little text file we need to build. Okay. So I'm going to go back to my lesson 5 folder. I'm going to make a new file. Heroku, this is a configuration file. The file name is procfile, Procfile, no extension. It's not a text file. It's called procfile with no extension. I'm going to click OK. It's probably going to create it. Okay, no, there's no extension. That's good. It's web server.js. So inside this code, inside this file, which you won't open. Here's my code, web : I think the issue is without this file, Heroku doesn't know where to launch the application from. So there's the code we need in it. This shouldn't affect anything on Azure. I think Azure will ignore this file, but we're going to need to now make a new commit to GitHub so that our proc file is included, and then we'll try and deploy it again to Heroku. So I'm going to go back to GitHub. I now have my proc file. I'm going to make a new commit. Added proc file for Heroku deployment. I'll make that commit and push. Okay, so now I go back to my repository again, proc files here. So I'm going to try to deploy it to GitHub again. So I'll go back to my deploy section. And I'll try and deploy this again. Yeah, so that adding that proc file fixed it. Here was my version without the proc file. And once I put it in, it knows server.js is in effect the startup file. And now my application runs. So once again, here's that file. Make sure there's no extension on it. So for everything else you do with Node in this class, I would recommend using one of these two hosts just because we have free access to both of them. You're certainly welcome to use any other cloud service that runs Node by all means. Go ahead and do that. These two are free for you and relatively easy to use. Okay, there are just a few steps you have to go through in the process. So really, Heroku needs this file, this proc file, and Azure needs this one. If you just want to use Heroku, then we don't need to copy the bin www. This is a process that Azure uses to run your Node applications. But the easiest thing is if you have both of these files, you have server.js and you have your proc file, well, then you can publish to both. So if you have an issue on one, you can use the same version of your application on the other. So next week, when you submit your portfolios, what I would like is all you need to give me is your link to your GitHub repository and the URL to either your Azure version of your portfolio, your Heroku version of your portfolio, or a version running on some other cloud server of your choice. So I just need the two links, live site and repo on GitHub. Has anybody been able to get it to run on Heroku? Anybody been able to get it to run on Azure? There's your proc file. There is somewhere in here as well where I can see the deployment history just like I can on Azure. I just have to find where it is. Oh, it's under activity. So again, we can see the different deployment and we can roll back to any previous version. So I'm going to stop this